Meditated.
Okay. I wouldn't be surprised to see old Rick float away one of these days. You never know about that guy. Okay, we'll begin our class. We left off where we talked about the three groups of New World servers. And the three groups are, first of all, a class that are enlightened people that a lot of them don't know who they are, but they have a sense of mission and they want to, they have a sense of higher will that needs to be accomplished. And they're mixed in with all kinds of groups throughout the planet. And they're doing their best to steer whatever group or people or family they're with into greater light and usefulness. Then the second group are more enlightened. They pretty much know who they are, and they're doing the same thing but on a higher level, and they're more sensitive to extrasensory perception and telepathy with other individuals. They can sense when they meet another member of the new group of world servers. Have you ever met somebody that you just feel, we're on the same wavelength? You know, you just get that impression like right away. How about you, Stacy? Have you ever felt that way? You meet somebody and you think, this person is somebody that is connected to
I
spirit.
scope them out all the time. Yeah, I do that all the time. It's part of, after a while it becomes second habit. And you rather find out who they are on the inside before you find out who they are on the outside.
Yeah. Have you ever had the opposite happen where you meet somebody who thinks he's real enlightened, but you figure he's not that enlightened? Have you ever had that opposite happen
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all have.
Yeah, there's a lot of people trying to get things going just to make money or something like that, that aren't really, don't really have your spiritual interests at heart. But there's a lot of good people out there too. So one of the problems with the disciples is they don't use enough discernment. They figure everybody that talks about spiritual things is spiritual, and that's not necessarily the case. And DK talks about this a lot, the importance of discernment, that we have to discern light and dark, and just not take people at their word necessarily, but be able to tune in to the inner spirit of other people.
Joe?
Yeah.
So yesterday we went to dinner at a place in Napa, Country Kitchen, someplace like that. I was paying the bill, and next to me was this guy, and I did just what you said. I tuned into his vibe, and there was something about him that made me want to connect with him. So I said, well, while you're buying that, you might as well buy a harmonica. They had a whole stack of harmonicas for sale and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I used to play harmonica when I was a kid, but I don't so much anymore. But we were at a birthday party, and I was playing a harmonica for my niece, Teresa. And so I had a harmonica on my belt, and I pulled it out, and I said, well, hey, we could play a tune. And he thought that was really amazing that somebody would actually have a harmonica.
That is pretty amazing.
I mean, who goes around with a harmonica strapped to
Yeah.
Anyway, so I said, well, you know, what's going on with you? He says, well, I'm a pastor from Alaska, and I was invited to come down to work with some of the kids here in the area. And I told him how I was interested in the same thing, and we hung out for about 10 minutes was talking to this guy, and we talked about the light of the soul, and of course his interest was going to heaven, that this is the one life, and after that, you know, he's going to go to heaven. I said, well, you don't really know that, because you have a soul that governs your actions, so, you know, don't get ahead of yourself. And I just connected with this guy. He gave me his email address, and I kind of stimulated his thinking a little bit into reincarnation, but didn't use the R word. So you never know, you know, who's standing next to you that you're picking up a vibe on, and you need to find a way to, whether it's a harmonica or buy him a cup of coffee or whatever, you can see a way to make a connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, a lot of people, when they meet their future spouse, just has something, an alarm go off in their inner being, thinking that, hey, I got to get to know this person better. Anybody have that happen with love of their life that they met? How about you, Juan and Eva? You're a happily married couple there. When you first met your wife, Juan, what did you have any inner sense about her?
There was talk, yeah. Yeah, there was, you know.
She's so cute though. She'd probably a lot of people was after her, I'll bet.
I have my alarm going though, that I have to get away as far as I can from this guy. I guess something says that my life is going to change.
Yeah, yeah.
The magnetic field was so strong that's why she never left.
Yeah, well, we're glad you two got together. That's really
yeah, we
really
just
good.
last Friday we celebrated our 33rd anniversary.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been married about the same length of time me and my wife have been married. That's great. Great.
Just recently saw some video that was talking about there's your heart has consciousness of its own, like the brain does, and there's a feature of the heart's consciousness is that when you meet a new person, your heart knows within 3 seconds how you would deal with that person for the rest of your lives. It just in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And we all have it. We all have that function.
About the seconds, about the time, I heard that 5 seconds, and then you recognize that person instantly. Like, you know, you need the 5 seconds to really feel something, and then it just bump, and you're there. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'll bet Adam and Marnie had that connection.
What'd you say, Curtis?
I'll bet Adam and Marnie had that connection.
Oh yeah. Matter of fact, they knew each other from childhood, pretty much, didn't you, Adam?
Yeah, we did. I was best friends with her brother. She lived up the street, and yeah, I kind of robbed the cradle.
So do you even remember the first time you ever laid eyes on her? You were so young, you probably weren't even thinking of romance at that time.
No, yeah. I mean, I've known her brother since I was 5 years old, and she was just a baby at that time. So it evolved slowly, and when I got back from my mission, I kind of was hanging out with the family, and then we did a couple things together, and then I told her one day, I'm going to marry you. And she looked about as frightened as you could be.
Yeah, you're a pretty scary guy, all right. Well, you got your really good kids there. Marnie's really a sweet little lady.
Yep.
And Michelle, how about you meeting your husband to be? What did any sparks happen?
Yeah, I think more for him than for me. I'm one of those people that played really safe because we were moving. We met in September and we were moving, so he had to really move fast, and he proposed like almost straight away, and we got married in January. So
he recognized you were a great catch right out the bat then, huh?
I guess so. But It was very fast.
Yeah. So that's that's something that a lot of people can identify with. Now, not everybody here is happily married. There's a number of single people, but even the single people have probably fallen in love once or twice. And you know, even if a relationship didn't work, it'll quite often it'll be somebody you'll meet again in a future life and then iron things out. Quite often, like my mom and dad got divorced, but I have a feeling that they have a very strong soul connection and they'll get together in a future life. And so we learn a lot by our failures, and oftentimes in a relationship maybe that ended when that first happened, that was still important for you to get together. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. I think you look over your, what we call our failed relationships, and oftentimes we learn great lessons from them that when you think about it, would you trade what you learned from a failed relationship for anything? Would you trade those memories or what you learned from it or how you advanced from it or whatever? So from one sense of speaking, there is no failure. Everything is steps that we take. So if you're not happily married, don't feel bad. You still learned a lot from all the experiences and relationships that you've had, and you're going to have more relationships. So we might even get old Ed hooked up with somebody one of these days. He looks like he's still got 20 years of good living ahead of him.
My dad used to say, "You're like Jesus, you love them all." But from the point of our spiritual evolution, the evolution in the wheel of growth has speeded up. And I see that we're not like 100 years ago where people needed to stay together to fend off the natives and the wolves. We have the opportunity to have experience, and that's what life's about.
Yeah, you know, we often don't appreciate how different our situation is compared to 100 years or 200 years ago. It's amazing the differences.
Reminded me of the story of the old guy walking in the woods, and he found a frog, and he picks it up, and the little frog starts saying, "Please, sir, don't hurt me, sir. I'm a enchanted princess, and if you kiss me, I'll become back a princess again, and we can live happily ever after." And the old guy thinks about it for about a half a second. He goes, "I'm 82 years old, and I think I'd rather have a talking frog."
That's how old Ed is, 82.
Yeah, right. Okay, now the interesting thing about this is DK has put a lot of stress on the development of telepathy. Now, why has he put a lot of stress on this? Because the third group of world servers is the masters and their close workers themselves. And they need to have mastery over telepathy to be able to do their work. After all, a lot of people are always trying to get in contact with the masters, and that would be impossible to get in contact with them if they didn't have power of telepathy. And so the DK kind of describes at one time how he can see things. He says that the masters can withdraw and kind of look upon the world, and they see points of light all over the world, and then they can tune in to the various points of light that they can see. So if you are a point of light and you're burning brightly because you're thinking something really in tune with higher will, one of the masters may see you as a point of light and then telepathically tune into you and maybe give you an impression that may give you some inspiration, that may give you some ideas as to how to proceed more efficiently. So the masters spent a lot of time in meditation, and in meditation they can telepathically tune in to any point of light upon the planet. And so if you ever want to be a master, one of the things that we need to focus on is being more sensitive to impressions from other people. When you meet people for the first time, tune into the light that is within them, what kind of intentions they may have, how advanced they may be, how much they're into the material side, how much they may be into illusion. Start tuning in to everybody you meet. And this is good learning on the way to becoming a master yourself. And no matter where we are, we've got a long way to go to get to the final liberation. So always think of picking your next step, and always part of that next step is becoming more sensitive to impression, more sensitive to impression of people you meet, more sensitive to impression from your soul, more sensitive to impression from the world of the intuition, where ideas are connected to your mind. And so think of being more sensitive. Part of that is just developing your love nature, being more compassionate. As you develop compassion and love, it increases sensitivity in every other area. So if the disciple focuses on the love aspect, it will really help him to develop that intuitive side. And the intuitive compassion feeling side, that's all connected with the female side of yourself, whereas the analytical thinking side is more connected with the masculine side of yourself. And all of us have both of these ingredients in us, though most of those in female bodies are more polarized in the female, and most of those in the male bodies are more polarized in the masculine side. But no matter where our polarization is, we need to tune into both sides of ourselves. And this is a problem a lot of people have, is they tune in too much to one side of themselves, either the female or the masculine. And we need to balance those two energies off. When they're balanced off, then it's easier to increase that sensitivity and develop that telepathic ability that you will eventually need to perfect if you want to become a master yourself. Okay, any comments or questions on that before we move on?
There is a very useful test that was widely known in the 80s called the Myers-Briggs test. And when you take that test, it's a small questionnaire, and it tells you if you're a thinking or a feeling person. And it's very, I think it's very accurate. You know, I've taken it several times, and I always turn out to be right in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, those tests are kind of fun to take, some of them, and
the Myers-Briggs test is, I think it's very useful for those people who don't really understand the difference in themselves.
Is that on the internet somewhere?
Well, it may be. I ran into it in the early 80s, but I would suppose it would be available.
Well, why don't you Google it, Ed, see if you can find it and post a link.
I'll look for it, yes.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
I've been noticing, I've been observing that there's a way that a practice that you can do that helps develop telepathy, communication mind to mind between people, and that is when you do a coordinated synchronized dance, like square dancing, or you see these things on America's Got Talent where all this group of 20 people, they do all these things and they make a flower out of themselves, and then they shape into, you know, they're all flowing around. And it's like when you do that with a group of people, you're anticipating fitting your movements to theirs, and that also develops a mental link between people, and you actually begin to hear each other's thoughts when you do that kind of dancing or group cheerleading or whatever they call that kind of activity. So just the physical coordinating yourselves in that kind of motion does actually develop mental telepathy.
Yeah, one thing we could do, it should be interesting with this group we have here, is focus in the week on the group itself and see if one particular individual comes to your mind, and then pick up their thoughts. Okay, so that's the assignment we'll give out for this week. Just, you know, if you're meditating or just thinking or just driving along in the car, just think of the group, and then see if a particular face or individual comes to your mind. And if that individual does come to your mind, then focus on, why did this individual come to my mind? Okay, and see what you can pick up about this individual. So we'll see if anyone gets any impressions they want to share when we meet again next week. So that's ought to be interesting. Okay, any other comments or questions before we move on?
I think it might be important, if they're going to do that, to write down the time that they pick up that impression. And,
yeah, that would be good too.
That time.
Yeah, maybe you'll pick up, have a face or individual come to your mind because at a particular time, maybe they were at some point of tension. You never know. It's always, in more details you remember, the better. Okay, anything else? The next great section of this is called the negation of the great illusion. This has to happen before a person can become a true white magician. Because as long as a person is trapped in illusion, he may acquire be able to use some of the rules of white magic, but he will be misdirected, and he will use the magical powers of the soul in the wrong direction. And this often happens. The phrase which says, he talks about the phrase that says blending fire and water. This has reference to the effect produced at the point of condensation after the great words bringing about that effect have been pronounced. And he doesn't tell us what those great words are, but they're often, when he talks about a word, it's not a word as we understand it. Sometimes it's a thought process or a phrase or a concept. So when he talks about a word, he doesn't always just mean a word the way we understand it. But a word in the higher sense is something that is understood in the mind that can activate a process. And that's the broader concept of esoterically what a word is.
Could it be a series of sounds that aren't words? But
right, a
sounds?
mantra composed of sounds could be classified as a word. An idea can be a word. Say, take the whole Bible as a book. In a higher way of looking at it, that whole book is a word, and so when he talks about words, you have to really examine the context carefully to understand what he's trying to say, because for one thing, he talks about how many words are guarded by the hierarchy because There would be dangerous ideas for us to have if we're not ready to use them with wisdom. And so that oftentimes that's just not individual words as we understand it, but actual knowledge of some type that is kept from us until we're ready to use it wisely.
Isn't the word considered the trigger for creating a thing? You have to first utter the word, like in the Bible, because, you know, the Lord said, let there be light, let there be, you know, the Lord, it always starts with he said, and then the thing gets created.
Right, right. In other words, you have to have the idea in your mind. If you're going to create something and make something happen, you have to have the idea or the word foment within your consciousness, and before that word can manifest. Now he talks here about, he says, heat and moisture are present in the production of all forms of life, but the great mystery, and almost the final mystery to be explained to the adept, is how the merging of the three fires can produce moisture or the watery element. In reality, there's no such thing as the watery sphere, for it forms the great illusion and seems more real than that which it hides and conceals. So he talks about the three fires. Now remember, the three fires are the fire that's in matter. That's the fires from the ethers that activate all living things. And then there's the fire that's in the soul itself, your higher self, what people call the spiritual world or paradise, so to speak. And then there's the fires of pure spirit, where you originated and your monad dwells. Okay, you have these three fires, and the fire of mind and the fire of matter interplaying produces the astral plane, and this is where the great illusion is. And just to demonstrate how powerful this is, the uniting of the fires of mind, a higher mind where the soul is, and the fires of matter produce the world of feeling as the average person understands it. Now, one of the things that makes the astral plane such an illusionary thing is there's two types of feeling. There's higher feeling connected with pure spiritual love, and that's very closely connected to true reality. And then there's lower feeling connected with the solar plexus, which the average person, when he talks about feeling or heart or love, he's talking about the feeling of the lower nature. And this is where the great illusion takes place. And this lower feeling is all caused by illusion. DK tells us that to the masters, this astral world does not even exist because it's pure illusion. But to average humanity, that's their greatest reality, because it is connected with everything that they feel on an emotional level. When Curtis and I were in sales together and we went to sales classes, they taught us that if you want to sell somebody, you have to connect with their feeling nature. He says people, the sales classes instructors, they told us this, that people don't buy because things make sense. He says they buy because of what they feel. So he says, if you want to sell somebody, you have to connect with their feelings and make them desire it, even if it's not what they need. And people often buy stuff that they regret later because the salesman connected with their feeling nature and made them want it. And then after they get it, they often don't even use it. And so it's kind of funny. When Curtis and I sold children's books, one thing we discovered was that people don't wait to buy their books until their kid gets around 8 years old, where he can really make use of the books. They buy the books oftentimes before they even have the kid, when the wife is pregnant, or maybe the prime time to sell them the books is when the kid is like 6 weeks old, long before he can read. That's when you can really, the salesman can really touch their feeling nature and make them think, oh man, my kid's going to be a genius, and I need to get these books as soon as possible, even though he can't read yet. So, so people buy what they feel rather than what makes sense. If they bought by what makes sense, they'd wait till their kid got 6 or 8 years old before they buy many books, or at least 4 years
Yeah,
old.
now you can't even sell encyclopedias.
Yeah, but if you approach somebody that's got a 4-year-old kid, they've already got all the books they're pretty much ever going to buy.
They've already got a laptop.
Well, right now, everything has changed. They can get everything on the internet now, but when we sold those books, there was no internet, and you had to approach them from the feeling side. Yeah, Curtis was really good at approaching people that way. We sold health spa memberships together, and he was really good at that. How did you go about approaching their feeling nature when you sold those health spa memberships?
Oh man, all kinds of ways. Well, looks like you could use maybe lose a pound or two, and you want to look good for the opposite sex, don't you? And you want to we sell the glamour idea of feeling good and looking good and being in shape, and how you're one step ahead of the next person. But I remember selling fire alarms with Vulcan one time, and these were very expensive fire alarms. They were like $1,000 for a set of 6 or 7. And we'd show this video of people's houses burning up and people running out of their houses on fire. And you don't want this to happen to you now, do you? Oh, no. So the close was, when it comes to protecting you and your home against the ravages of fire, can you think of a better time to protect your family than right now?
Yeah.
And they'd say no, and then we'd go over and bang a nail on their wall and hang one up and close them. But a lot of the sales were not just glamour based, but fear based. It was all illusionary sales, but it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, they say pretty much all sales trainers tell you it's at least 90% emotion, 10% logic in making sales. And but look at the media. The media is selling the whole world on how dangerous this coronavirus is. And in the United States, we've had 1 death from it. So you're more likely to be killed by being struck by lightning than the coronavirus at the present. Yet people are scared to death of this coronavirus. People are terrified of it, and it's not much worse than the regular flu. Most people, where we have a good medical treatment, like in the United States, there's I think there's only been 14 cases on land. The rest of them have been on sea with Americans, but only 14, 15 cases. And everybody but one has pretty much got better, 1 or 2 anyway. And so it's kind of like the flu. So we're really worried about this. It's nothing like the Black Plague, where once you got it, you were dead within about a day, and it killed about 1/3 of the population of the whole planet, of Europe anyway. So there's been
Yeah,
a
if you
lot
think
worse
about
stuff.
it, if you think about it on a mass scale, the dark side is producing mass fear, which is bringing low vibrational entities
Yeah.
in mass type production.
And one of the things
that's
it's
what it's
doing is
causing it.
we get a lot of our medicines from China, and these our importing of them is starting to get interrupted, which will cause a lot more deaths than the virus itself if that happens. I mean, imagine people can't get penicillin or
Oxycodone.
yeah,
They were saying
life-saving drugs for different
they were
things.
saying in Wonton, which is about like New York City, that the streets are closed down. When people, if they want to buy something, even medicines, they have to go to a storefront that's got a one of these bar screens like you see in New York, where people put it at night. They close their screens, these gates,
Yeah.
like, and they got to reach under there, and they give them, yeah, it's exchanged like that. The streets are shut down in that whole city, and it's like New York.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's I think it's important that we do what we can to prevent the spread, but I think the world is really overreacting to this. Now, if it was like the Black Plague or something like that, then we would have a lot more justification. But where it's so far about as dangerous as a regular flu, it seems to be a total overreaction. Now think of
buying masks. They're buying masks and that aren't doing any good. The virus can go around the mask, through the mask. You know, there's
now, Curtis, I have a question for you. You've been done a lot of sales in your life, and you understand you have to appeal to their emotional nature. Suppose you were given a sales presentation to a master, and in the master's mind, the astral emotional world is pure illusion. How would you approach him to sell him something?
I'd use logic.
Yeah,
they're above the illusions of glamour and the lower mental miasmas. So you'd have to use logic and appeal to a higher sense of service and effect. You know, what we want to actually make happen, the end result.
Yeah, you could just imagine if you had a group of regular people to sell to, and then you had another group that were adepts and masters that you had to make a presentation to. You do it quite a bit differently, because the higher group wouldn't be bamboozled by emotional theatrics. Tony Robbins wouldn't have a lot of effect on those guys.
Well, you know, he talk about emotional display. That's Tony Robbins is a master at evoking people's emotion.
Oh yeah.
I used to sell cookware, and I would do a dinner presentation, and they always told us, sell the sizzle, not the steak. And so I'd cook up a steak, and I'd have everybody smell it. And it was just, I mean, it just titillated all their senses, and they would buy because of the smell of the steak or the meatloaf or just the whole dinner. Very effective.
Yeah, so DK tells us that to become a master white magician, we have to negate the great illusion. The great illusion is caused by the astral plane, which is produced by the interplay. Remember, it's the interplay of the mind and the lower ethers that's connected with the physical plane. This interplay, and it's caused by our thinking. What's interesting is that the astral plane only exists for humans, doesn't exist for animals, doesn't exist for the masters. It just exists for us. Yeah, you can't if you want to convince your dog of something, that something, food is good, he has to smell it, and he knows pretty much instantly if he wants it or not. Okay, it, nothing to do with the emotion or feeling. It's just instinct. Okay, connected with the lower ether. Okay, so, but humans are different. We have that interplay, and then desire comes in, and desire, human desire connected with the mind, has created a tremendous illusion that DK says is more real to the average person than reality itself. So that's an interesting statement to make. And we have to learn to see beyond this. If you want to see the complication of the great illusion, look at the two political sides, the political left, the political right. What's their arguments on TV? And from the point of truth that you may be in, we all have points of truth and illusion, but we all have points of truth we're at. And when you're at a point of truth and you watch these arguments, you will be able to see tremendous illusion that's taking place as the left battles with the right. And sometimes illusion is on one side and sometimes the other side. And this is where it's most plain right now. When I was younger, it seemed like the focus of illusion was more in religion than politics, but politics is becoming people's religion these days. So politics right now is really where the great illusion is really manifesting, and everything's political. They turn this coronavirus into a political weapon. They turn global warming into a political weapon. They turn everything turns political, and everything has illusion in it that has to be seen through. And so the question is, how can the disciples and seekers of the world raise themselves above the emotional planes so they can see through the eyes of the soul? That is what we must always ask ourselves. And any comments on that? Let's see, let's pick on somebody. Who haven't we called on lately? Well, Ken, what do you think? How would you advise some young kid about seeing beyond the emotions to the plane of the mind where you can see things as they are? What kind of advice would you give to some young guy asking you about that?
Yeah. Oh, I'm thinking.
Put you on the spot there, didn't I?
I've been up I've been up a long time. Yeah.
What time is it over there in New Zealand? No, you're not New Zealand. I keep thinking you're in New Zealand. Philippines, right?
Yeah, it's 2:21 a.m. right now.
Okay, you're one dedicated student.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I'd have a better answer if I could think really clear right now. What I would tell a new student, how to reach the higher mind and to bypass the emotion.
Yeah, how about just starting with common sense? You think that would be a good idea?
Yeah, I think so.
How many people do you meet that just don't seem to have regular common sense about what they're doing?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
And that was me yesterday. You know?
You know, that's one thing. That's one thing we can all relate to is common sense, and people have a sense of what should be the right approach, but we don't always follow it, do we?
Some common sense isn't so common. I mean, you know, people can be in delusion and think it's common sense. You know,
Yeah,
someone's sense of what's right may not be what's really right.
Yeah, you're exactly right there, Ed.
And another thing too is we have to consider that all of this that we see going on in the news is all part of the illusion. It's part of this world stage, and it's a drama that has to be worked out. And I think that these things like the coronavirus and some of this stock market falling 3,000 points this week is part of the great evolutionary process, because the old forms have to be broken. You know, we have a lot of greed and a lot of stuckness in the world that has to be broken.
Yeah, that's true. You get through one veil of illusion, then you're gonna be approached by another veil, and it takes quite a bit of effort to be able to escape all the illusions that are available to us, because we escape one, then there's still another layer. He says a veil of illusion resembles the moment before dawn, when the world of familiar things is seen through the fogs and steamers of mist which veil the world form, also veils the rising sun. Okay, so in the morning you can sometimes there will be a lot of mist and fog, and it even veils the rising sun. The rising sun is a symbol of the soul. The soul is like a sun to us that can dissipate all the fogs of illusion if we let it. As we live lives through this period of great illusion from the astral plane, our seeing is distorted, and we exist, he says, as half gods. That's an interesting term DK uses. He calls us, who are wandering through the mist of the great illusions where we don't see clearly, he calls us half gods. So we're just a little bit like a centaur, half horse and half man. We're half God and half human, because we have the power of God within us, but we don't understand how to use that power. So we're half gods and we're half humans, but we see ourselves as disconnected from God because of the great illusion. So this explains why we have such political and religious disagreements, and we fight over them, because we see through this illusion. One person sees one illusion because, well, you take two people that's centered on the feeling nature. One person will see an illusion, and then the other person will see another illusion, and then they will argue illusion against illusion, and oftentimes they are both wrong and both seeing incorrectly and both condemning that which is also within themselves. DK says it's the dual nature of the mind which causes this illusion. For the mind of man presents to him the keys of the kingdom of heaven, or locks upon him the door of entrance into the world of spiritual realities. So we have within us godlike powers, he tells us. And these godlike powers have actually created the illusion. So we have powers beyond that which we can imagine. And these tremendous powers that's in us as humans has created a tremendous illusion, a little bit like the holodeck on Star Trek. Remember, the holodeck was not real. It was created by illusionary principles so they could go play, and they would play games, or they would do activities, or they'd go on a safari or something. And it was all illusion. And it was created by the power of their minds put together this holodeck. And this is what humanity has done. They've created a tremendous holodeck of the astral plane, which seems real as long as we are in it. When we are in it, and the feeling nature is the governing power of our lives. We are in a holodeck, but we don't realize we're in a holodeck. At least in Star Trek, when they were in the holodeck, they knew that they were there, and they were playing and having a good time. It was recreational for them, but they knew that it was illusion. We are in a holodeck, and we do not know it's illusion. We think it's real. And so imagine some Star Trek guy going on a holodeck where he's in a dangerous situation, but it's not really dangerous, but he thinks it's dangerous because all of a sudden he lost his memory that he was on a spaceship, and he's in this holodeck and he loses his memory. That's kind of the situation we are in as humans. We're in this astral reality, and we think it is the real thing, and it is just something we have created to entertain ourselves.
We're meant to be in this so we can devise a solution to the whole thing.
Right, it's a game for us, but we don't realize we're in a game. So that's kind of interesting. It's like I say, some member of Star Trek loses his memory. They throw him in the holodeck, and he thinks that's his reality, whereas it's really an illusion. If he figures it out, he's able to press the switch, make the holodeck disappear, and then see the real world as it is. And this is what happens when soul contact is made. Then the person sees the real world as it is. But it's this, unlike switching off the holodeck, it happens in stages. It happens because it's a fairly lengthy progress. It's like we're in, visualize yourself in a holodeck, not realizing it's a holodeck, and then you get some clues that it's not real, but it's hard to believe it's not real, so you don't really accept it at first. But then you get more clues and you start searching for, well, how do I find the real world? If this is not the real world, how do I discover the true reality? And so you get clues, and then pretty soon you're convinced there is another reality that is real beyond this. I am going to discover it. And the disciple finally gets a firm conviction within his own mind. Yes, I am going to pursue this to the end and find the true reality. I'm going to establish true soul contact. He says the mind has the ability to manifest its thoughts and fluctuate between I am God and I am form. And this creates much illusion and difficulty. So the person reaches a stage where he understands he's got the powers of godliness within him, but still he's attached to the form nature. So he understands he's got these powers, and a lot of the self-improvement books kind of guide people in that direction. Say, hey, subconscious mind has all this power and you need to program yourself. This is heading them the right direction, where they understand they have tremendous powers of godliness within themselves. They maybe don't call it godliness, but they talk about tremendous power of the subconscious mind and so on. But they still identify with form, and say the self-improvement books say, now you can accomplish all these things because you have all these powers, and you can get rich and get a new car or a new house and all these things. So they still identify with form, but it also identify with the powers of the soul that's within you. And he says we have to gravitate with this. This continues the illusion where we say, I am God and I am form. Okay, we need to graduate beyond the I am form, because we are not form. We just use form. So when we attach ourselves to form, we continue the great illusion. This attachment must be followed by a detachment, where the person obtains the consciousness and of the observer rather than being the participant. He says, yet it is this very illusion which renders up to man eventually the secret password into the kingdom of God and brings about his release. So the illusion is even though it's difficult, creates all kinds of problems, caused every war we've ever had in our history. He says it brings a secret password that enters us into the kingdom of God and brings about release. So this whole process we're going through is a tremendous process of evolution, spiritual evolution, where we will wind up being much more enlightened than we were before, because of everything we're going through in this great illusion in the astral plane. And part of the understanding of this is separating the lower feelings from the higher, because remember, the higher feelings associated with love and wisdom are connected with the higher spiritual reality. It's the lower feelings, and by lower feelings, a lot of the things that we call lower are fairly high from the viewpoint of the average person. For instance, the feelings connected with romance, they're pretty much astral feelings, and they're good for us to use with wisdom as long as they're directed with the mind. But when they capture us to the point that they control us, any of these astral feelings only lead us to illusion. But the astral feelings, it's part of our human nature, but we don't want to just negate them. We want to master them so that they are seen by the higher mind and controlled by the higher mind. And when they're controlled by the higher mind, they can be used in a positive way. For instance, romantic feelings can be used in a very positive way to make a relationship function smoothly and interestingly. But if a person is governed by those feelings with no mind involved, then they can lead to disaster. He says, a secret science of the master of wisdom is a secret of how to dissipate the fogs and the mist and the darkness and gloom which are produced by the union of the fires in the early stages. The secret of the master is the discovery that there is no astral plane. He finds that the astral plane is a figment of the imagination and has been created through the uncontrolled use of the creative imagination and the misuse of the magical powers. So we're all magicians, really, when it comes right down to it. You and I have the powers beyond what we realize. We have all the powers that we've ever desired, and they're inherent within us. But the way we've used these powers is we've used our creative imagination as humanity itself to produce this tremendous illusion on the astral plane, and it's all connected with the feeling, desire, nature. Think of how much people are controlled by their desires. And to control our desire is a very difficult thing, because we have to replace our lower material desire with a higher desire. Because even there's even illusion in the word desire itself, and the fact that desire has many different levels, but the desire that has to be negated is desire connected with the physical plane. We may have a desire to connect with a higher self, and that is a positive desire, not connected to the material side. Okay, so many teachers out there say we have to negate desire completely, but God created this whole universe because he desired to have this universe. So are we saying that the God that created the universe was wrong in having a desire to have a universe? No, it wasn't wrong at all. It was part of some master plan. Each of us are ingredients in the master plan. The desire that has to be negated is the desire connected with the material world. For instance, with material possessions, the disciple that's negated the desire will seek the material acquisitions for the purpose of keeping himself functional, so that he can function and be useful, and beyond that they will have little importance. For the average person, he'll want a new car, so everybody will think, hey man, look at that cool car that guy has, you know. And so the average person thinks a lot more different about acquiring material things than the disciple. The disciple will look at material things for their usability only, whereas the other person will look at material things as a glamour. He wants to be richer than the other guy, wants to be more successful than the other guy, wants to have a more beautiful spouse than the other guy. He wants to have a better job than the other guy. Okay, this is all connected with glamour and the emotional self, and this is what has to be transcended. Okay, any comments on that?
I think we can look at life as a labyrinth or maze, and sometimes it's hard to see your way through. But one of my spiritual teachers said that if you climb higher in the tree, you can see your way farther down the path. So
yeah.
Climbing higher in the tree by aspiration, by meditation, study, and service, you begin to raise above these miasmas and fogs.
And we're going to talk about that next week. I just noticed we went over time here. Sorry about that, you guys.
Well, I think
I was going to say
language from desire to aspire.
Yeah. Well, the word desire means to bring down from the Father, desire. So it's not a bad thing, like you say, you know, even God desires. But this class kind of parallels the labors of Hercules, and Hercules is called the Son of Man, who is the Son of God, having both aspects in him, and his journey is to make his way through a series of going through different gates where he's assigned to go through these different labors to raise himself out of the miasmas, the fogs of glamour and illusion. And that's his whole journey. And this labor of Scorpio, like you say, he goes through nine heads of the Hydra, which represent 9 aspects of glamour and illusion. And one of them is comfort, how we get too comfortable in our situation in life, and we strive for comfort, and then we stop growing. And so that creates a whole ideology around accumulation of goods and things until we just, our progress stops. So, you know, that's the whole trick.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I always like that phrase, son of man who is also the son of God. Always like that wording.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, we're going to end the class here, and remember your assignment. Focus on the group and see if one individual comes to your mind, and then focus on, ask this question: why did this individual come to my mind? What can I pick up?
Don't forget to mark down the time.
Yeah, the time too. Yeah. So good group today, and we will see you next Sunday at 2 p.m. all being well. 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Life,
Bye-bye.
light, love,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.